Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization, stands as one of the greatest enigmas in human history. Flourishing nearly 5,000 years ago, it stretched across what is now Pakistan and northwestern India, covering more land than Mesopotamia and Egypt combined. It was one of the world's first great urban cultures. Yet despite its achievements, the Indus Valley remains a mystery because so little is truly understood about it. Archaeologists continue to uncover pieces of this lost puzzle, but the full picture is still incomplete. What makes it even more fascinating is how such a vast and sophisticated society could disappear without leaving behind clear answers. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were marvels of ancient engineering. Unlike other early civilizations, the people of the Indus Valley built their settlements with meticulous planning. Streets were laid out in perfect grids. Houses were made of uniform baked bricks, and perhaps most impressively, they developed an advanced drainage and sewage system that would not be matched for thousands of years. Each home had access to clean water, and waste was carefully channeled away from living areas. To this day, historians marvel at how a Bronze Age society created urban planning that even modern cities sometimes struggle to achieve. This was not a chaotic culture, but one that valued order, hygiene, and functionality. Trade was another key element of the Indus Valley civilization. Archaeological evidence shows they've traded with Mesopotamia, exchanging beads, cotton, precious stones, and pottery for metals like copper and tin. Seals carved with animal figures and mysterious symbols have been discovered in large numbers, suggesting a well-developed system of commerce and possibly even early forms of branding or ownership. These seals, decorated with images of elephants, bulls, and other creatures, also represent the greatest mystery of the Indus people: their undeciphered script. Despite decades of study, no one has been able to fully translate the writing system, which means their records, laws, stories, and perhaps even the explanation for their downfall remain locked in silence. Without a readable language, the Indus Valley continues to guard its secrets tightly. Religion and social organization within the Indus Valley also remain subjects of debate. It's unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where grand temples and monuments to rulers dominate the landscape. The Indus cities show little sign of kings, palaces, or massive religious structures. Instead, the focus appears to have been on communal life and civic order. Some scholars believe the famous Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro might have had ritual or religious significance, perhaps connected to purification ceremonies. Others suggest that the civilization may have been relatively egalitarian, with less evidence of social hierarchies compared to other ancient cultures. But because of the lack of decipherable texts, we cannot know for certain whether they were ruled by kings, priests, or councils. Around 1900 BCE, how the Indus Valley civilization began to decline. The reasons for this collapse remain one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in archaeology. There is no evidence of massive invasions or wars that could have wiped them out, unlike the destruction often seen in Mesopotamian or Mediterranean histories. Instead, clues suggest a more complex and gradual process. Some scientists point to climate change as a major factor, arguing that shifts in the monsoon system led to extended droughts, drying up the rivers that sustained their agriculture. Others propose that the shifting course of the Indus River itself may have disrupted farming and forced populations to migrate. Archaeological sites show evidence of people leaving cities, slowly abandoning once thriving urban centers. Yet even if the climate and rivers changed, it is difficult to understand why such an advanced and resilient society could not adapt. There are also theories of disease, famine, and internal social breakdown. Perhaps their highly organized system became fragile under pressure, unable to respond to new challenges. Some scholars speculate that overpopulation strained resources, leading to conflicts or migrations. Others suggest that trade with Mesopotamia declined, cutting off vital connections and wealth. The truth may be a combination of many small factors rather than a single catastrophic event. What makes the mystery more compelling is that while the Indus Valley disappeared as a dominant culture, its people did not vanish completely. Many scholars believe they gradually merged with other groups in the region, influencing later Indian civilizations in ways that are still visible today. In language, culture, and traditions, the Mayan civilization remains one of the most fascinating and perplexing cultures in human history. Rising in the tropical lowlands of what is now Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and southern Mexico, the Mayans built a society that flourished for over 2,000 years. Their achievements in architecture, astronomy, mathematics, and art were extraordinary, and their influence spread across Mesoamerica. At the height of their power, the Mayans constructed massive stone pyramids, developed a sophisticated writing system, and created one of the most accurate calendars of the ancient world. Yet despite their brilliance, something happened around the 8th and 9th centuries that changed the course of their history. Great cities that once thrived with tens of thousands of people were suddenly abandoned, leaving behind ruins swallowed by the jungle. The disappearance of the Mayans is one of history's greatest enigmas, and scholars have long debated the reasons behind their decline. The Mayan cities were unlike anything the ancient world had seen in the Americas. Places like Ticalpalenca and Copan were centers of art, trade, and religion. Towering pyramids rose high above the forest canopy, temples and palaces were carved with intricate glyphs, and ball courts were built where ritual games were played, often tied to spiritual or political significance. The Mayans were expert mathematicians who understood the concept of zero long before many other civilizations. They were also advanced astronomers, carefully charting the movements of the stars and planets, using this knowledge to create calendars that remain accurate even today. Their writing system, composed of hundreds of glyphs, was used to record royal lineages, myths, historical events, and astronomical observations on stone monuments, pottery, and codices. This was not a primitive culture lost in time, but one that thrived on intellect, spirituality, and an intricate understanding of the natural world. However, the collapse of the Mayan civilization did not happen all at once. It unfolded gradually, and evidence suggests it was a complex process rather than a single catastrophic event. Between the 8th and 9th centuries, major urban centers in the southern lowlands began to decline. Monument building slowed down, royal inscriptions ceased, and populations dwindled. The reasons for this decline are still debated. One major theory points to climate change, particularly a series of prolonged droughts that struck the region. Because the Mayan cities relied heavily on seasonal rainfall and had no major rivers to support large-scale irrigation, a severe drought would have devastated agriculture. Without enough food to sustain large populations, famine and disease could have spread, forcing people to abandon cities and migrate to more sustainable areas. Environmental strain may have been worsened by the Mayans themselves. Archaeological evidence suggests they cleared vast stretches of rainforest for farming, which may have led to soil depletion and ecological imbalance. As populations grew, the pressure on resources increased, making the society more vulnerable to environmental changes. Deforestation could have also intensified droughts by reducing rainfall in the region, creating a cycle of environmental collapse. This combination of human activity and climate stress may have destabilized the very foundations of Mayan life. Political factors also played a crucial role. The Mayan civilization was not a unified empire, but a collection of city-states, often engaged in warfare with one another. Rivalries between powerful cities like Tikal and Calakmul created instability and drained resources. Wars disrupted trade networks, weakened alliances, and placed further burdens on agricultural production. As kings and elites demanded more from their subjects to finance wars and monument construction, common people may have lost faith in the ruling class. There is evidence that some monuments were deliberately destroyed, possibly by disgruntled populations turning against their leaders. Internal conflict combined with environmental stress could have made the collapse inevitable. Yet while the great cities of the southern lowlands were abandoned, the Mayan people themselves did not vanish. In the northern Yucatan, cities such as Chichen Itza and later Mayopan rose to prominence even after the collapse of southern centers. This suggests that the decline was not the end of the Mayan world, but a shift in power and geography. The culture continued to evolve, and even after the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, Mayan traditions, languages, and beliefs persisted. Today, millions of Mayan descendants still live in Central America, keeping alive aspects of their ancient heritage despite centuries of conquest and change. The mystery of why the Mayans abandoned their great cities still captivates historians and archaeologists. Was it primarily the droughts that broke their agricultural system? Was it political collapse fueled by endless warfare? Or was it a combination of environmental mismanagement, social unrest, and shifting trade networks that slowly unraveled their society? The ruins hidden deep in the jungles stand as silent witnesses to a once great civilization that reached incredible heights of achievement yet could not escape the forces of nature, politics, and time. The story of the Anasazi, also known as the ancient Pueblones, is one of the most mysterious chapters in North American history. These people flourished in the deserts and plateaus of the American Southwest for centuries, creating a culture that was both highly adapted to its environment and rich in spiritual meaning. They are best remembered for their astonishing cliff dwellings, cities carved into canyon walls, and complex networks of roads that connected distant communities. At their peak, the Anasazi were an advanced and thriving civilization, yet by the end of the 13th century, many of their great settlements were suddenly abandoned. The reasons for this disappearance remain uncertain, leaving historians and archaeologists with questions that continue to puzzle us even today. The roots of the Anasazi culture go back as far as 1500 BCE, but their civilization truly flourished between 700 and 1300 CE. They lived in regions that are now parts of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. And despite the arid and harsh landscape, they created communities that supported thousands of people. Among their most remarkable accomplishments were the cliff dwellings, like those found in Mesa Verde, where entire villages were constructed within caves and canyon walls. These structures, built of stone and adobe, rose several stories high and contained hundreds of rooms, storage areas, and ceremonial chambers known as kivas. They demonstrated not only the ingenuity of the Anasazi in adapting to their environment, but also their communal way of life, where families lived closely together in tightly knit societies. Agriculture was at the heart of Anasazi's life. Developed advanced techniques to farm in the dry desert climate, relying on irrigation, check dams, and terraced fields to grow crops such as corn, beans, and squash. These foods formed the basis of their diet and allowed their populations to grow. They also hunted game, gathered wild plants, and traded widely with neighboring cultures, exchanging pottery, turquoise, and other goods. Archaeological findings reveal a broad network of trade that connected the Anasazi with distant peoples as far south as Mexico. This economic and cultural exchange enriched their society and helped it flourish despite the environmental challenges they faced. Religion and spirituality also played a central role in Anasazi life. The kivas, circular subterranean chambers found in many of their communities, were used for rituals and ceremonies. Artifacts and rock carvings suggest a deep connection to celestial movements, with alignments in their architecture that reflected the sun and moon cycles. Petroglyphs and pictographs left on canyon walls depict symbolic figures, animals, and spiritual imagery, offering glimpses into their beliefs and worldviews. While much about their spiritual practices remains unknown, it is clear that religion was woven into the daily rhythm of life and guided the decisions of their society. Despite their achievements, signs of stress began to appear by the late 1200s. Archaeologists have long debated what led to the sudden abandonment of the great Anasazi settlements. One widely accepted explanation is a series of prolonged droughts that struck the region. Tree ring data shows that the late 13th century was marked by decades of severe drought, which would have devastated crops and made survival extremely difficult in an already fragile environment. Without sufficient food and water, entire communities may have been forced to leave in search of better conditions. However, environmental change alone may not fully explain the mystery. Evidence of fortifications and signs of violence found at some sites suggest that conflict may also have contributed to their decline. As resources became scarce, tensions could have risen between neighboring groups, leading to warfare, raiding, and even instances of cannibalism, as suggested by controversial archaeological findings. Social and political instability could have fractured communities that had once thrived together, pushing them to abandon their ancestral homes. Another possibility is that the Anasazi did not simply vanish, but rather migrated and merged with other cultures. Many scholars believe that their descendants can be found among the modern Pueblo peoples, such as the Hopi, Zuni, and others who still live in the American Southwest. Oral traditions of these groups often speak of migrations, hardships, and movements from older homelands, echoing the archaeological record of abandonment. This suggests that, while the great cliff dwellings and cities were left behind, the people themselves continued on, carrying parts of their culture into new communities. What makes the mystery of the Anasazi so compelling is the suddenness of their departure and the haunting silence of the ruins they left behind. Walking through the empty cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde or Chaco Canyon today, one can still see the carefully constructed homes, the ladders leading into kivas, and the pottery fragments scattered across the desert floor. These remnants speak of a society that was once vibrant and alive, but now exists only in fragments and echoes. The unanswered question of why they left continues to stir the imagination of historians, archaeologists, and visitors who gaze upon their ancient cities, hidden in the rocks. History is filled with stories of civilizations that once thrived with immense power, wealth, and influence, only to fade into silence and leave behind ruins that whisper of their former greatness. The Indus Valley, the Maya, the Anasazi, and the Khmer Empire all represent societies that rose to extraordinary heights, achieved remarkable advancements, and yet somehow could not withstand the pressures that came their way. Their disappearance is not just an unsolved mystery for archaeologists and historians, but also a profound lesson for humanity about the fragility of even the most advanced cultures. The great lesson of vanished civilizations lies in the realization that progress, no matter how extraordinary, is never permanent. When one studies these civilizations, a pattern emerges that reflects the vulnerability of human achievement. The Indus Valley people engineered sophisticated drainage systems and organized cities, but environmental shifts and possibly river changes destabilized their world. The Mayans reached astonishing levels of knowledge in astronomy and mathematics. Yet drought, overpopulation, and political strife drove them away from their magnificent cities. The Anasazi adapted brilliantly to the harsh desert, creating intricate cliff dwellings, but a combination of prolonged drought and social pressures forced them to abandon their ancestral homes. The Khmer Empire constructed one of the most spectacular religious monuments on Earth in Angkor Wat, supported by vast hydraulic systems, but extreme weather and conflict caused their collapse. These stories, though separated by thousands of miles and centuries, echo a common truth. No matter how powerful, every society is vulnerable to forces greater than itself. Environmental factors appear time and again in the decline of these civilizations. Nature's unpredictability has shaped human destiny since the beginning. Extended droughts in Mesoamerica and the American Southwest, floods and river shifts in South Asia, and the changing monsoon patterns in Southeast Asia all disrupted the balance that civilizations depended on. Agriculture, the foundation of every great society, is intimately tied to the environment. And when climate shifts became severe, the systems that supported millions of people could no longer function. It reminds us that even the most ingenious human technologies and structures are always dependent on the stability of the natural world. Yet environment alone does not explain everything. Human choices also played a critical role. Deforestation, overfarming, and mismanagement of resources contributed to the weakening of societies. The Mayans cleared vast areas of jungle, and the Anasazi cut down forests for fuel and construction, which may have worsened the drought conditions they already faced. The Khmer built enormous hydraulic systems that eventually became too complex to maintain when the climate turned against them. In each case, human ambition and expansion created systems that were powerful but fragile, unable to withstand the stress of sudden change. These choices suggest that civilizations are often undone, not just by nature, but also by their own actions. social and political tensions also emerge as a repeating theme. The Indus Valley remains mysterious in this regard, but in the Mayan world, constant warfare between city-states undermined unity. In the Khmer Empire, power struggles and invasions weakened the core of the state. The Anasazi may have experienced internal conflict as resources grew scarce. A society can be brought to its knees as much by division within as by threats from outside. Power concentrated in elites, heavy demands on the common people, and weakening trust in leadership all appear in the records of these vanished cultures. These stories underline the importance of social cohesion and adaptability in ensuring survival. Another lesson lies in how civilizations leave behind their traces. They do not always vanish completely, but they transform. The Mayan people still live in Central America today, carrying forward traditions, languages, and cultural practices, even though their great cities are ruins. The descendants of the Anasazi live on as Pueblo peoples, preserving oral histories that echo the journeys of their ancestors. Cambodia remains a center of Khmer culture, even though Angkor itself became a silent monument hidden by the jungle. For centuries, the Indus Valley people may have blended into later cultures of South Asia, their influence continuing in ways we may not fully recognize. What disappears then is not necessarily the people themselves, but the structures and systems they built, leaving ruins that remind us of how much was once possible. The ultimate lesson of these vanished civilizations is that no society, no matter how advanced or powerful, is immune to collapse. Great monuments, brilliant knowledge, and strong armies cannot guarantee survival if a culture does not adapt to changing conditions. Human beings build with pride, believing their achievements will last forever, but history shows us that permanence is an illusion. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro, the jungle-covered temples of the Maya, the cliff dwellings of the Anasazi, and the stone faces of Angkor stand not only as reminders of greatness, but also as warnings of fragility. They teach us that progress must always be accompanied by humility, for even the mightiest civilizations are ultimately vulnerable to the forces of nature, the pressures of society, and the passage of time.